Hey guys, the NBA season just ended, but the fun never stops in the NBA because we love to talk ourselves some free agency, and a lot of money and a lot of players will change hands over the next few days, and quite frankly, already have. It's our duty to bring those indicators to you of why some of these moves make absolute sense. And if we're looking at the Dallas Mavericks, I told you in the opening stanza here of the early line for this morning's show, I thought Klay Thompson to the Dallas Mavericks was the absolute perfect spot for the Splash Brother to land. And as you see that graphic there, a 3-year, $50 million deal for Klay Thompson to go from the Golden State Warriors over to the Dallas Mavericks. If we are looking at that anticipated starting lineup now for the Dallas Mavericks entering into the 2024 season, Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, P.J. Washington, Daniel Gafford, and now you put into that small forward position, Klay Thompson. Now, the question is going to be, we do know Klay Thompson of right now. It's not the Klay Thompson of 2017, 2018, and on. He's older, he's been injured, and not quite the same player, but that doesn't mean that he can't be an efficient part of a machine that has the legitimate chance to be an NBA champion. You just saw the Dallas Mavericks go last year into the NBA Finals and came up a little bit short. They just didn't have enough firepower. So, Ben, when we talk about the Dallas Mavericks making the move for Klay Thompson, he doesn't have to be the hero. He doesn't have to be the franchise savior. He just has to come in and play his part, which means play a little bit of defense, knock down your wide-open three-point shots. I love the fit here for the Mavericks and Klay Thompson.
Donnie, you could see the writing on the wall last year in Golden State. Klay Thompson coming off the bench, that maybe this historic 13-year run would be coming to a close. We'll see what his role is in Dallas now, along Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, but it does seem to be a natural fit. And you said this yesterday, do not pay for nostalgia. For what we are seeing in terms of this NBA summer and some of these offseason acquisitions, 3-year deal worth $50 million is not terrible. And it sounds crazy to say because Steph Curry and Klay Thompson have been such a factor in the NBA over the last decade plus, decade and a half, that Klay Thompson is 34 years old and yet doesn't feel like he is 34 years old, but that's where he is in the later stages in his NBA career. When you look at the odds in terms of how things play out in the Western Conference, we are seeing some new emerging teams near the top. The Mavericks price a little bit shorter after the acquisition of Klay yesterday, under $5. But Donnie, keep an eye on those top 4 teams. 3 teams under a 5-1 price to win the Western Conference crown next year. 4 teams separated by less than $1.50. The Thunder, now the favorites in front of the Nuggets after the acquisition yesterday of Isaiah Hartenstein. The Nuggets, the second best price. The T-Wolves not all that far behind Denver. And Dallas not all that far behind Minnesota. It is a new look in the Western Conference because entering last season, despite at the end of the year, the top 4 seeds being OKC, Denver, Minnesota, and then Dallas in the 5 spot, entering the season, it was still the Suns, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Warriors expected to make a run, and some of these teams deeper down the board, Oklahoma City and Minnesota, overperforming on expectation. Now it's almost a changing of the guard, if you will, out west.
Yes, it is. And also, I love the fact that we're taking a look here in the summer. Now, granted, again, free agency isn't over. We're going to see how some of these teams fill out over the summer before they get the training camps. But take a look at the OKC Thunder, plus 350 price. Denver Nuggets, 4-1 price. Minnesota Timberwolves, plus 430. The Dallas Mavericks, plus 490 before you get that shelf to the Suns and the Lakers. And you can honestly make an argument for each one of those top 4 teams as being the best teams in the Western Conference. If you're asking me right now, look, we always know what we get out of the Denver Nuggets, but they weren't splashy this offseason. They're just going to sit back and be like, you know, we got Jamal Murray. We got our center here who's the MVP and quite frankly could win another one this year. We'll be fine. Team continuity is what's going to make the most sense. But I love what the Oklahoma City Thunder did this offseason so far. They added those, and what we called yesterday with Coach James Young was on, the grown-ups in the room. And I thought that made a lot of sense where you have a young team that's learning how to win on the fly, get some of those grit and grime guys that'll play hard defense and be leaders in that locker room. I think it's fantastic. The Minnesota Timberwolves, we know what they have. They have enough to get over the hump now. The Dallas Mavericks adding Klay Thompson. And also, let's not forget, the Phoenix Suns, if they don't make any changes, that is a hell of a talented squad that's coming back.
Yeah.
And LeBron James, let's just say, if they get DeMar DeRozan here as they're waiting to see what LeBron James is going to opt back in for, if they have enough money to spend on another free agent type of player or to make a move, 15-1. I love the Western Conference, loved it last year, and it looks sensational, Ben, heading in already to 2024.
Yeah, it does. Listen, LeBron James and Anthony Davis remain in Los Angeles. As
Yes.
of this moment, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal remain in Phoenix. To my knowledge, none of those three of the big three out in the desert are free agents. Could there be some trades later this NBA offseason and summer ahead of next year? Certainly so. But as of right now, those are the loaded rosters. And yet we look at Golden State after 13 seasons with Klay Thompson, and of course 15 years with Steph Curry. The year after Klay was drafted, Draymond Green selected in the second round by Golden State. That big three, the anchor of the franchise that turned things around near San Francisco for this team. 4 NBA championships. A 5-time All-Star was Klay Thompson after 13 seasons in Golden State. In DRS, of course, there was the magical run from 2014 through 2019, 6 consecutive trips to the NBA Finals, winning the Larry O'Brien Trophy 3 of those 6 times. And then after 2 down years, missing the postseason, back into the NBA playoffs, back winning an NBA championship without KD there, led by that big three once again, the Splash Brothers and Draymond Green. And now the Warriors are 20-1 to win the Western Conference next year. Expected to make some moves this offseason to fill out the roster around Steph Curry, but he might walk into training camp come late September, early October, and not recognize the teammates that he has.
You're right about that, too. And also, you see that graphic that I put up there, like a 4-time world champion. Like, our memories sometimes are so short here to remember how dominant, truly dominant that Golden State Warriors franchise was for a few years here when they had Kevin Durant and sort of plundering through the Western Conference, which has always been deep. So now you're finally seeing that flipping over the page where Klay Thompson leaves town and what's left here of the Golden State Warriors dynasty if some of those guys get older and aren't able to be replaced. But just to get back to the original point, Klay Thompson to the Mavericks, that's a big-time win for them and a perfect spot for Klay Thompson. And the Warriors did have to turn the page here, Ben.
The market moves. Dallas now a plus 490 price to win the Western Conference. That's the 4th shortest number. Now to the Boston Celtics. Now, big money moves yesterday for the reigning NBA champs. That's the Boston Celtics that look to invest in their title defense entering the 2024-25 NBA season, and not only investing in the roster, investing in the entirety of the organization, as we will describe in just a moment. But first, the richest man now in the history of the NBA. His name is Jayson Tatum. 5-year deal worth $314 million. When the extension kicks in, that's nearly $63 million per year. 62.8 to be exact. That is the richest contract we have ever seen in the NBA. DRS last offseason, his teammate in the NBA Finals and Eastern Conference Finals MVP award winner, Jaylen Brown, made headlines despite the struggles in the postseason for the C's, getting a huge offseason extension, 5 years worth $304 million. A little bit of financial maneuvering there. It never actually hit its peak of 304, but still one of the richest contracts in the history of the NBA. Jayson Tatum surpasses Brown's number from a year ago. Again, that is the highest paid player in the history of the association, and his name is Jayson Tatum.
But again, it's wild, man. Usually we take a look at NFL teams, right? Like a 53-man roster. You got to pay a lot of guys, including the quarterback here. But they don't make as much money, obviously, per man as NBA players do. But when you take a look at the Boston Celtics at this point, and I know it's probably not a correlation like, hey, these salaries are getting out of control, because you've made so much money on your investment for the Celtics. We're talking about the ownership group since 2002. And that money is going to be so big from the TV contracts, which is why these salaries are elevated. These salaries just don't go up because we said they go up despite revenues, right? The revenues have to correlate with the salaries, but when you take a look at the roster, 5 or 6 guys making up like $750 to $850 million worth of contracts over the life of those players here. It's kind of amazing to look at. But if there was a team that you should be paying that money to, it's the Boston Celtics. They achieved success last year, winning that championship. You do know you have great young players. You want to take care of those, because what's going to happen when you say with Jayson Tatum, wow, he makes that much money? Wait till 5 years when guys are making 75, $80 and $95 million a year, you'll figure it's a bargain. It's the same way we take a look at the quarterbacks in the NFL. That guy's not worth that money. No, he is, because he's coming up for a contract at a time when the money is really good, and you just stack chips on top of chips at that point here. But I have no faults here. If you're hating that Jayson Tatum, that's way overpay. It's not. It's just what the salary cap is. The Celtics can afford it, and they'll be right back in the mix as favorites next year to win it all. Take care of your players, who take care of your organization. That's what the Celtics are doing.
They're an incredibly short favorite to win next year's NBA championship. A 3-1 number. They are $5.50 in front of everybody else in the association. The Sixers, the Thunder, the Nuggets. $5.50 shorter than everybody else. The expectation out east is the Celtics facing off against whoever earns that second spot in the Eastern Conference Finals. A lot can change, but as of right now, and with the roster retooled and reinvested in, Boston needs to be back there. That is the level of success the Celtics will be judged by. Much the same story this year in 2023-24, and they passed that test with flying colors. When you look at Jayson Tatum's deal, Donnie is spot on. Before this NBA offseason, there were 6 players set to make $50+ million entering next year. Jayson Tatum now outduels everybody in terms of the monetary figures, but it's just the rising tide lifting all ships like we see in the NFL. The contracts are inflated because the money is there. Let me ask you this, DRS. 20-1, the number on Jayson Tatum to win the NBA regular season MVP entering next year, tied for the 7th shortest price. Will Jayson Tatum ever win an NBA MVP award?
I think he will win one. I just don't know if it's going to be next year. And it's crazy to say, like, maybe he wins one in a Celtics team that's a little bit down because he has to be that center focus. Now, we understand he's probably the best overall player in the Celtics, but they're just too good a team. And sometimes you sort of get that against you because on any given night, certain players can go off. I don't think he wins one over the next year or two. But having said that, I think he wins one in his NBA career. Yes, I do.
It is really interesting because the argument that you could make is team success correlating to individual success.
Yeah.
And yet that's already been the case for Boston. And Tatum never really has become all that close to winning an NBA MVP award. And, of course, you'll look at what we saw this postseason, losing out to his own teammate, Jaylen Brown, in both the Eastern Conference Finals MVP market and, of course, the NBA Finals MVP market, despite closing as a hefty odds-on favorite midway through game number 5 against Dallas. Jayson Tatum gets paid, so too does Derek White, signing a 4-year extension with the Boston Celtics worth nearly $126 million. The investment in Tatum. Last summer, the investment in Jaylen Brown. Now the investment in Derek White as well. They also acquired Kristaps Porzingis and Jrue Holiday last offseason. You can see the makings, DRS, once again, to be in the NBA title race this year and certainly stacking up for that title defense.
Yes, and like sometimes you just like there's different levels to the league, right? You take a look at some organizations that are horrendous on a year-to-year basis, and then one team goes, well, here's my starting lineup. Jrue Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, Porzingis, then we can fill in with Al Horford. And you look at some of the other league teams around. It's like, how does this happen at this point here? That just shows you the health of the organization for the Celtics, getting all those years of stockpiling draft picks, but making the right draft picks when they got those, and then you have enough capital to trade away some of those draft picks to get superstar caliber players, then have an ownership group that says, you know what, we're not about like, you know, the Minnesota Timberwolves who A-Rod's trying to buy the team behind the scenes, wrote out a manifesto that basically says, hey, look, we're going to immediately drop payroll here to make as much money as we possibly can. So when you take a look at the Celtics, good for them. When you're in that market where they expect you to win for the Boston Celtics, provide that leadership, provide that dollars. They've done that. And in turn, they got another world championship here. And it doesn't surprise me one bit. It's a well-run organization that's high paid with his players and taking care of them. And again, the players taking care of the organization back by winning championships for them.
But who is truly going to fund said organization? Like when you pick up a round of beers for the boys at the bar, who's paying the tab? Because the Boston Celtics are now up for sale. Majority ownership in Boston, putting the Celtics up for sale and making them available for purchase. But you would think if you were ever going to buy the Boston Celtics, this would be the time, despite probably having to pay the premium. Championship number 18, investment in a large way in your superstars as well. How much cash can we round up? Do you think it's a worthy investment?
I think it might be a worthy investment at that point. And by the way, it's very rare in sports these days because most of the time these owners aren't selling for the money itself. Guys like Daniel Snyder and Donald Sterling, they actually get kicked out of the sport so somebody's able to buy their franchises per se. So it's kind of interesting at this point now where he's not like an old guy at this point, right? With Grossbach, you just saw him hold up the trophy there. He's owned it for quite some time, but usually it's that status symbol like, I own the Boston Celtics. Like every party you go to, the whispers in the background, hey, man, that's the guy that owns the Celtics right there. And it's usually a status symbol for these guys, not a money-making venture. So I am sort of interested. And also keep in mind this, Ben. Like, I love the NFL, but there's a lot more question marks on the viability of the NFL game over the next, let's just say, 15 to 20 years than the NBA. The NBA is a global program at this point, and the fees are skyrocketing to try to buy into this sport. So I am surprised that he's sold at this point or looking to sell. Now, granted, a lot of money is going to come into his pocket and be fine, but it's interesting, as I said, again, most people in order to sell need to be kicked out of their league, and they're selling willingly, and this isn't a downtrodden franchise at all. It's just won a championship.
At all.
18 total championships in their history, one of the more historic franchises. So that's interesting to me.
They bought the team back in 2002. Whatever the going rate is about to be, they are going to make a very, very, very large profit. It's probably not going to surpass what the Commanders were bought for, or even the Denver Broncos a few summers ago in the National Football League, but it would not surprise me as the highest paid franchise in the history of the NBA, or the highest selling price, whatever that looks like. A Philly focus bright and early on this Tuesday morning as NBA free agency and this NBA summer now underway. We welcome on Josh Reynolds joining us here on the early line to talk about all the moves the 76ers have made that now see Philly tied for the second best price to win next year's Larry O'Brien Trophy. Josh, we appreciate the time. Thank you for being here on this Tuesday on the early line.
Of course, guys. It's an honor anytime I get to jump on and chat Philly sports with you guys.
Donnie's going to have a great time. Yep. I know I am as well. So, of course, Josh, the big news late on Sunday night, after the first few hours of NBA free agency was relatively calm, we got our first big blockbuster. Paul George leaving Los Angeles and now a member of the Philadelphia 76ers. 4-year deal worth $212 million. What was your immediate reaction to Paul George heading to Philly?
Reaction, honestly, was I can't believe the plan that they laid out in front of us for the last year is actually happening. You remember back, Daryl Morey kind of laid out the path before last season started when there weren't any free agency moves, there weren't any names, and everybody kind of started to hit the panic button. They kind of laid it all out and said, hey, don't worry, we're just bringing on these one-year deals, we're focused on next offseason. Obviously, Paul George was a pipe dream at that point. I never in a million years think the entire Philadelphia thought that, hey, this is going to actually happen. So initial thought was unbelievable. This is really happening because the fit between him, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid, when healthy, I have to very much express that, when healthy, is absolutely perfect.
And I do agree, Josh, because you're taking a look at Paul George coming over, and it's really a two-pronged attack because me as a 76ers fan could say, hey, we got the best player available. It's going to be awesome. But the odds market also reflects how good a move that was for Paul George coming over to the Philadelphia 76ers and some other parts. But can you talk to us here on where Paul George actually fits in with the Sixers in the rotation? What are the expectations for Paul George and the Sixers next year?
Absolutely. I think he fits in perfectly on both ends of the floor. I think people are forgetting that he is a good defensive player. Now, look, he's not going to go out there and win defensive player, but Philadelphia has not had a wing stopper. They traded for one last year in Robert Covington, who led the league in deflections over several seasons. Injuries took him out. Being able to plug Paul George in there into that spot, again, alongside Tyrese Maxey and the anchor of that defense and Joel Embiid, is going to change everything.
when you look at what Philadelphia has already done in the first few days of this true offseason, they add Paul George and they reinvest into one of their budding superstars in Tyrese Maxey. 5-year, $204 million extension for Tyrese Maxey to keep him in Philadelphia for the long term. There's some of the other moves we have seen out of Philly. Kelly Oubre brought back 2-year deal worth more than $16 million. They add Andre Drummond and Eric Gordon, a guy that Daryl Morey is very familiar with as well. Some of that vet experience across the roster. Let's focus on Tyrese Maxey because, Josh, you said it very well. The idea is PG, JoJo, and Maxey, as good of a big three as you will find around the Eastern Conference and in the NBA. Is this the trio to lead Philadelphia back to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since 2001?
I legitimately think it is. And I think that all Philly fans have to believe that it is. This is far and away the best three that it has been a part of. And I think now this has kind of put things into a different ballgame for Embiid where, look, there have been plenty of excuses, plenty of things that have happened over Embiid's playoff career, injuries, whatever. This is it. Like, it has to happen this season. The biggest leap that I think we could have ever imagined and hoped for last season, and obviously was rewarded for it with that max extension, which we were all expecting. They have to give the young kid a shout out. He was very patient through this process. He bought in. They told him, hey, this is our plan. We've got to be patient in giving you this extension, though, because we got to go out and get these free agents. We got to bring in Paul George. And he bought in. And you got to give him a lot of credit for that because he just again, signed it after these deals were done. Also have to give a shout out to Andre Drummond coming back to Philly because that dude is very underrated. I think he is far and away the best backup big that Joel Embiid has had in his career. So to be able to bring him back, obviously the games are won and lost when Joel Embiid is off. That, again, being able to bring him back in and just plug those minutes, save that time when Embiid is out, that's going to make a world of difference.
I love that you brought up, Josh, too, Tyrese Maxey saying, you know what, I'm young, I'm talented, I'm not worried about my money now. It will always be there to help the Philadelphia 76ers out because so many times the agency and the player like, hey, look, I got to protect my guy, and rightfully so if he gets injured to make sure he gets as much money as he can right away. But also, give a little credit to the Sixers. You take a look at Eric Gordon, which is a 1-year minimum contract. He fits a need. He's a shooter. You can never have too many of those. But Andre Drummond, 2 years, $10 million. That's $5 million a year. Kelly Oubre being brought back here on less money than he was making before, I think was a great find. Let me ask you this, Josh. With the Sixers the way they're shaped up now, they still have some money left over. Are there any other moves that we might be looking at for the Philadelphia 76ers that they can still make over the next couple days?
The roster still needs to take shape. We're really in need of a forward, and Daryl Morey obviously is very active. And you can crush the guy, you can give him credit, but one thing that Daryl Morey does is piece together teams like this. He goes out and he gets big names. And I think the forward position, obviously still sitting there. We don't have a starting forward. I think one name to keep an eye on is in Brooklyn. The fire sale going on there. I think that they're looking to just unload as many contracts as possible. I think Finney would fit. He still fits under that salary cap without bumping us to the next apron. I think that is a name that we will see the next couple.
Josh Reynolds, we appreciate the time. Thank you for battling through a couple of technical issues there. The Philadelphia 76ers, second best price to win the NBA's Eastern Conference crown at a 4-1 number, only behind the Boston Celtics. There should be optimism in Philadelphia. I know Josh Reynolds and Donnie Rightside both feeling it on this Tuesday morning, early in the NBA offseason. Josh, as always, we appreciate the time. Thank you for being here. Some more big news as of this Tuesday morning around the association. Donovan Mitchell returning to Cleveland. We'll break it down up next. Spida stays in Cleveland. The big news this summer for the Cleveland Cavaliers, the hiring of Kenny Atkinson as the head coach with the anticipation that it would please Donovan Mitchell to keep him in the land, and that is what has happened. Donovan Mitchell is not going anywhere. He remains a Cleveland Cavalier.
Yeah, that's a big signing there for Cleveland because you never want to lose your superstars, especially when they're young and in their prime. You want to keep them in town. And also, we had to know that when that coach gets relieved, you're asking your superstar player, would you like this coach to be your coach? Would you like him to continue? Or do you want us to go in another direction? And if we do go in another direction here, Ben, who would you like that coach to be? So seemingly, you got the blessing from Donovan Mitchell on bringing in the new head coach. I like this for Cleveland. They were underwhelming last year, and yes, they got injured into the playoffs. But this team has the basis here of some really good young talent that's yet here to see it mold into maybe a championship contender. Maybe we can get over the hump now, because the biggest question in the room was, is Donovan Mitchell going to go to the Los Angeles Lakers just like every other player? Nice to see him stay home. Now you can get on with your lives in Cleveland and start winning basketball games.
So the Cavaliers this postseason, get past the Orlando Magic in a low-scoring 7-game series. Then, of course, very short-handed into the second round, they lose in 5 against the Boston Celtics that saw Donovan Mitchell miss the final few games of that set. They fired J.B. Bickerstaff, the rotating cast and crew around the NBA and the head coaching circle. Bickerstaff now in Detroit. Kenny Atkinson, former head coach of the Brooklyn Nets, worked under Steve Kerr the past few seasons for the Warriors. Now the new head man in Cleveland. Donovan Mitchell spent the past 2 NBA seasons with the Cavaliers. Each of those 2 years, a young core elevated by Spida got them into the postseason. This year into the second round. But Donnie, what exactly is the ceiling for the Cavs? 20-1, the price on Cleveland to win the Eastern Conference. We just showed you the odds. The market has not moved since the news of Donovan Mitchell's contract extension. 3 years worth $150.3 million, a little bit north of $50 million per year on that annual average salary. And I would still say, at least in my estimation, despite Spida staying put, Cleveland is a playoff team at best, maybe second round, if that. This does not really make the Cavaliers, by any means, in my estimation, a true conference contender out east.
No, it doesn't. It certainly doesn't. And also take a look at what could have happened last year. You could have stepped into the void where the Sixers left because basically they were injured and underperforming. The Milwaukee Bucks left because they were injured and underperforming. You get the drift there. You might be able to make some way. But then again, you got to the playoffs and you got injured with your best players here. So you had to keep the superstar in town because that does attract other players to come along with them. But I think you're right here. When you're just looking at Boston, Philadelphia, New York, Milwaukee, Orlando, and Miami right now, already ahead of the Cleveland Cavaliers in that odds market. Now, granted, I understand that the Magic, Heat, and Cavaliers have the same 20-1 price, but you just saw, hey, Mitchell is coming back right now, and all of a sudden you're saying, well, where's the odds movement here? Why aren't we locking at the FanDuel Sportsbook to push them up? So when you're that far down the list here, it doesn't give you a lot of inspiring content here for 2024 to say, you know what? Now's the year the Cavaliers are going to do this.
And you see the levels of separation. The Boston Celtics on their own tier. Who is the second best team in the Eastern Conference? It's what we asked you in our Fade the Public poll that we'll take a look at to start off hour number 3. Up next, our guy in Beantown, George Balecki from Nesson, will join us live right here to talk about the Celtics in the aftermath of winning an NBA championship, the vibes in Boston around the title parade and all that we have seen already, the investment into the C's, the team up for sale, all that goes into the rest of this summer in Boston. But still, the Celtics well in front of the Sixers and the Knicks, who seemingly are battling back and forth in the prices for who the NBA's Eastern Conference second-best team is in front of Milwaukee. And we expect the Bucks with Giannis and Dame to make some moves. Then it's a very large drop-off to Orlando, Miami, and Cleveland. And Donnie, one thing maybe not overlooked, but the Indiana Pacers, who were in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Celtics and swept despite 4 competitive games for the most part, a 30-1 price, 8th best in the Eastern Conference at this time.
Yeah, you got some pretty good basketball teams now in the Eastern Conference that are really getting disregarded here, and you're right by the Pacers. They got a quality base that you can probably say they should be a top 4, top 5 team when it's all said and done. But I think we're just looking forward to the Celtics are good now. The Sixers have revamped. We're expecting bigger things from the Knicks. And yes, the Milwaukee Bucks, if they just stay healthy, have a formidable opponent as well to the Boston Celtics. I like where the East is going. No longer are we looking at like, oh, it's a 2-team race. That's not the case. You have the Celtics and a lot of teams jockeying for number 2.
Speaking of those Celtics, we go to Boston up next with George Balecki here on the Early Line. It's not often during the summer that we get George Bolecchi's Boston Breakdown. So when we do, we are greatly appreciative of it here on this Tuesday morning on the Early Line on Sports Grid, live in Beantown from Nesson. George Bolecchi joins us here. Georgie, as always, we appreciate the time. Thank you for being here to recap the NBA championship run for the C's and the money going around in Boston to start off this summer.
Yeah, man. Great to be on with you guys as always. You'd think day one of free agency would be wild enough, but the news of the Celtics selling, interesting time in Boston to say the least, but let's get into it, Ben and Donnie.
I think it is a fascinating kind of situation to monitor because at the pinnacle of the sport, now the franchise up for sale, but we'll talk about that in just a few moments. George, overall, though, how is the vibe in the greater New England area in Boston, Massachusetts at this moment after championship number 18? Rumor has it you were on one of the duck boats celebrating that Boston parade.
I got to say that rumor is false. You got to recheck your sources. I was eating tapas in Barcelona, unfortunately, but a couple of my buddies soaked in the parade. The vibes are still high, riding high off that 18th banner. And the excitement in the city is still palpable. Jayson Tatum signed a Supermax. Derek White agreeing to a 4-year extension for $126 million. That is huge for the fans in Boston. He's beloved. He's a great contributor and such an important player for this core. But then the news of the sale of the team coming down yesterday, it makes it all bittersweet because this is the best ownership group in the city of Boston. They have local ties, whether they were born in Worcester or went to school in Harvard. But this was an ownership group backed by saying, we're all about Banner 18. We're all about Banner 18. They would talk about Banner 18, and they backed it up with their checkbook, with their sentiment, with their actions, with empowering Brad Stevens to go out and do whatever the hell he wants as a mercenary of a GM, doing trades like no one else, but then to come down to that they're selling it. Personally, I understand. You bought the team in 2002 for $360 million. It's valued around $4.5 to $5 billion right now because of the demand and want for an NBA franchise. It could sell for $6 to $7 billion, let's say. That is absurd to go for $360 million to over $1 billion in general. They maxed out the value of the franchise, and with the new CBA coming down the pipe, with the second apron being real and hindering teams and creating parity in the NBA, where a team like the Celtics is fine right now to deal with that second apron, but they will get slapped on the wrist where they can't just shell out contracts and players for a 2-for-1 trade. They'll lose their first-round draft picks, but how valuable is that? They can't do mid-level exceptions, which they've done in the past. All of this coming down, and by the way, they gave out these Supermaxes. They don't have to pay Jalen or Jayson anymore. It's on someone else's credit card to pay them. That is what this ownership group did. They went all in, but punted the money down the road. They did the right thing, maxed it out, and they're going to get their value. So I know you're asking about the vibe, but you can't talk about the vibe in Boston without talking about the outlook of this ownership group putting the team up for sale. It does suck that 2 weeks after you win an NBA title, 2 weeks, this comes down, but this was a decision that is years in the making because it doesn't happen that quick.
No, it's a great point you bring up, George, and let's keep it on this point, too, because when you take a look at ownership groups, sometimes they're beloved. Let me just go back to Philadelphia for myself. We had Norman Brayman, who had an unbelievable electric squad in the 1980s, but he was more based on the bottom line. I'm not going to sign free agents. I'm going to let all my star players walk because at the end of the day, I'm actually going to make more money regardless of what we do on the field. The reason I bring this up is you take a look at Minnesota's about to change hands. They got word in Minnesota that the first thing that the new ownership group was going to do is they were going to limit the salary cap on their team to get back to more profitability. If we're taking a look at the Boston Celtics, the one thing they never have to worry about is that bottom line here where they spend a lot of money because even in Boston, the Boston Red Sox, they should be operating as one of the top 3 teams in Major League Baseball with a payroll, and they sit back and go, we're sold out every game. We have a wonderful franchise. Win or lose, we're going to make money hand over fist. Are we worried in Boston that the new group coming in as that corporate conglomerate maybe goes, you know what? We're going to sell out. We're going to make more money. Let's limit the damage here.
I think that worry should definitely be real in Boston. That's what I think of, too. I'm trying to think of who my ideal owner is. I don't care if it's a local person. I don't care if they're young, if they're old. They just have to be all in on winning like we saw what the Celtics did. And what it paid in dividends. 2 banners this ownership group bought. They doubled down and paid 2 superstar elite wings. They drafted those 2 guys, developed those 2 guys, and then filled out the rest of the core. That has to be the worry because you see it all across the league. What a salary cap is, what a team is actually paying and for and going into their salary with that as well. That's a tough part. And that has to be the worry in Boston of whoever gets this team to not be as intent on winning and having that be the priority. Because now what you could have is it's the NBA. It is the biggest league in the world. And it is the Boston Celtics, which isn't just a big deal in the NBA, but one of the biggest franchises in all of pro sports around the world. It's the Celtics. It's the Lakers. It's the Knicks when you're talking NBA, right? And then it's everyone else. It's the Sixers too. I'll give you that, Donnie. But that's how it goes down. Now you have to come in. And this is a city that has some of the smartest fans in the world. And they will see right through the BS. We don't care about margins. You're a billionaire. We don't care about you lining your pocket anymore. We are the people that buy those season tickets. We are the people that show up to the games. We are the people that show up in millions on Causeway in the middle of a heat wave to celebrate you on duck boats with a parade. Bring us titles. That is what the fans want. They don't care about margins. They don't care about profits. But I know billionaires, they don't care about us.
Beautifully said, George Balecki. Beautifully said. You saw it right there. Nearly $920 million now invested into Boston's Big Five that won championship number 18. Nobody richer in the history of the NBA than Jayson Tatum now signing that Supermax extension, 5 years worth $314 million, nearly $63 million per year. That is the richest contract in the history of the association. Somebody else is going to pick up the tab. But as we focus on Tatum, Georgie, of course, this season for both Tatum and Jaylen Brown defined by this level of success in the hunt for title number 18. They do that, but Brown wins Eastern Conference Finals MVP and NBA Finals MVP. It's only been 7 years in the NBA for Jayson Tatum, all 7 seasons spent with the Celtics. And now an NBA champion. What already is Jayson Tatum's legacy in Boston?
He's a top 5 player in franchise history. I mean, statistics says wise, but also what he was. Being a guy that has been ahead of schedule and a reason this team had been to so many Eastern Conference Finals during his tenure. Sure, they've come up short time and time again, but you watch, it's the ability. You see him play, and it's the revolution of his game as well. Because for them to win this title, Jayson Tatum went from the scorer, and sure, he still chucked up those sidestep threes, but he went from the scorer to the playmaker, the driver of an offense, was always a great defender. Jaylen Brown would pick up the opposition's toughest assignment. Sure, he had Drew Holiday, but Jayson Tatum being an elite defender as well. His legacy, he brought a title to Boston. This franchise went so long by the time they won in 2008. And yes, I know in this city, the joke is it's only been 5.5 years. But Boston, championship-wise, has been irrelevant and not even close since Tom Brady left. Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown brought a ring. They're both top 10 in franchise history. In my opinion, they will easily finish as so. And their book is not even finished being written yet. They're not even 28 years old. But Jayson Tatum, with his ability, you see the numbers, and he won a ring. He is top 5 in franchise history.
Jaylen Brown, where it stands, just 27. Jayson Tatum, only 26, doesn't turn 27 until next March after the All-Star break next season. Quickly here, Georgie, you said it. Their story is not finished yet. Boston, a 3-1 favorite already to win next year's NBA title. How far in front are the Celtics from the rest of the association?
I still think they're leaps and bounds the best team. They kept this entire core. I don't know what Kristaps Porzingis will look like next season. I don't know how he recovers from that ankle injury. That is rare. He's always injury prone, but they got what they wanted out of him with the ring. What you get with Brad Stevens is not someone that completes his team in the offseason. He pushes it until the trade deadline. This team, I don't care about Paul George in Philly because Joel Embiid needs to be humble and not play more than 50 games. The Celtics are still the best in the NBA.
Take it to break on a statement there. More on the early line next. The NBA summer continues on this Tuesday morning. Big news out of Cleveland. Donovan Mitchell signs a 3-year, $150.3 million contract extension to remain in the land. That's more than $50 million per year. He will be one of the 10 highest paid players entering this next season in the NBA. Donnie, we talked about what Donovan Mitchell means to this Cleveland organization. He has been the land for 2 years. They have won at least 50 games each of those 2 seasons. They have made the postseason each of those 2 campaigns as well, but never passed the second round. And despite getting to round number 2 this past playoff run, it was shortly lived. Only a 5-game set against the Celtics, where Spida missed the final few games of that series. New head coach in Kenny Atkinson. Do you feel any differently about the Cavaliers' outlook entering next season?
Oh, much better, because it could have been much worse if Donovan Mitchell just decided to leave the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? So just keeping your homegrown superstar. I don't want to say homegrown is not fair because he technically wasn't drafted there, but just keeping your superstar who actually wanted to be there. And let's be honest with ourselves. You take a look at Cleveland, where teams are like, oh, I'd like to play in Miami or Los Angeles, sometimes with some of my friends here, where even LeBron James, who was from that neck of the woods, was like, I love Cleveland. Hey, Mr. Bosch and Mr. Wade, let's all join forces in Cleveland. Like, hey, good luck with that, man. Yeah. We're going to Miami. You joining us? Because, you know what? I'll leave at that point. So I just think it's a major win for Cleveland, keeping that superstar. And also, you take a look at what's down the line. Superstar players who are all-stars are able typically to attract other talent to come play for them. I don't know where the Cleveland Cavaliers would be if Donovan Mitchell had to move on. Oh, what, for 4 or 5 first-round draft picks and pick swaps down the line? They would be in major trouble. Now, we take a look at where they sit in the standings, right? It doesn't mean that Donovan Mitchell's back, so they should win the East, but at least it keeps them viable as a team you have to watch out for. And certainly from a fan perspective, you kept your guy here. You can enjoy basketball in Cleveland.
It's hard to poke holes at what Cleveland has done the last 2 years with Donovan Mitchell. 51-31 2 seasons ago, 4th best in the Eastern Conference. Had home floor advantage against the Knicks, were bounced in the opening round. Last year, 48-34, 4th in the Eastern Conference playoff seeds. They had home floor advantage against Orlando. They get past the Magic in 7 games, but eliminated in that second round in only 5 by the Boston Celtics. Hard to get mad at anybody losing in a short series against the C's. As we saw, Boston won 3 of their 4 sets in this playoff and championship winning run in 5 games, and the other one in the Eastern Conference Finals in only 4 over Indiana. But it's also hard to argue that Cleveland has a higher ceiling with Kenny Atkinson or Donovan Mitchell staying put in the land. We have seen tons of movement, though, in just the last week or the last few days in the NBA's Eastern Conference. Last week on draft day, that was 6 days ago, when the New York Knicks acquired Mikal Bridges from Brooklyn. They re-signed OG Anunoby. They had the second shortest number at plus 350 to win the Eastern Conference. But some moves that were anticipated out of Philadelphia, the acquisition of Paul George, the 76ers now in front of the Knicks, 4-1 price on Philly, plus 450 for the Knickerbockers, and Boston remains the short favorite at plus 145. What is your assessment of the Eastern Conference here in this NBA offseason?
So much more fun next year than it was this past year, because again, even though, let's just forget about the way it ended in the Eastern Conference, which everybody injured but the Celtics, and the Celtics ran over everybody, and then eventually ran over the Mavericks in the NBA Finals. But we were talking about last year, Ben, was what? It was a tier of 2 with maybe the Sixers on the outside if James Harden was going to come back. Now, he didn't come back at that point, and we figured it was going to be the Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks. As long as both of those teams stayed healthy, nobody else was really going to challenge them. That's much different this year. Now, granted, the Boston Celtics won their championship, re-signing everybody, and seem to be, they're ready and be poised to go on one of those runs that maybe we saw from the Golden State Warriors about 5 to 6 years ago. But having said that, the Sixers are going to be a player. Yeah. The Knicks are much better. I expect the Bucks to be healthy and much better. The Orlando Magic are a rising team here in the East. We know that the Miami Heat are a well-run organization. They'll make moves to be competitive. So even though Donovan Mitchell does come back to the Cleveland Cavaliers, they're still way back of the process from everybody else that we anticipate that's going to be ahead of them. So from just a look at the Eastern Conference, we can now start to view the Eastern Conference much like the Western Conference, where it's like, wow, it's going to be a slugfest all the way through. There are a lot of teams here in the East that are going to be able to compete with the Boston Celtics. Can they overcome the Celtics? I don't know, but at least you should be getting a run for your money now.
And that was our conversation and slight criticism of the Celtics' run through the Eastern Conference and an NBA championship. How difficult truly was the path. With how quickly Boston got through, it was hard to argue they were not a tier ahead of everybody in the association. What if they had played the healthy Milwaukee Bucks and Doc Rivers wasn't Doc Rivers? What if the Denver Nuggets weren't bounced in the second round and had been there at the end of the day? We'll never know. It didn't happen. And Boston took advantage of that scenario. I will just say this. Last year in the Western Conference, 5 teams finished with 50-plus wins. Only 2 in the Eastern Conference, and that included the Knicks at exactly 50. We had 3 teams out west finish with 55-plus victories, only 1 in the Eastern Conference. That was Boston with the NBA's best record, and by far, at 64-18. I think that is the conversation entering next year. Boston a peg of its own, but who is up next? Who is that second-best team? Will it be a cakewalk once again for the C's come playoff time in the Eastern Conference, or will there be a legitimate contender alongside the Celtics? Will Boston face that tough test, extended into a series, 6 or maybe even 7 games to prove their might? That seems to be the offseason conversation. I still remain slightly skeptical that at the end of the day, there will be the team to push Boston to its absolute limit, but at least you would think there's a better chance of that coming out of that second-best team in the Eastern Conference.
It's hard to repeat. It really is. And also, you have to take a look at the Boston Celtics finally getting over that hump, playing more basketball than most teams in the NBA later into your offseason, a lot more partying in that offseason, and then trying to get refocused to do it again next year when everybody is going to be hungry to win their NBA championship. So the Boston Celtics sit on the top of that hill. Everybody's chasing them now.
Now we'll look at the Western Conference prices since free agency began next. NBA free agency is not even technically 48 hours old, and we've already seen a ton of market movement. We showed you where it stands from the Eastern Conference crown title odds. Now we do the same out in the Western Conference. Entering free agency, 6 p.m. Eastern on Sunday evening. The Nuggets were the favorites. And really, Donnie, when you look at the left side of this column, it's still a similar story. 3 teams at the top of the conference, tightly compacted, separated by just over $1. Still a similar story despite the market movement. The Nuggets no longer the favorites after OKC signs Isaiah Hartenstein, adding a down low defender and a guy who can crash the glass with the best, Oklahoma City. Now the favorites in front of the Nuggets, plus 350 for OKC. Denver back by $0.50 at 4-1. The Timberwolves third best price at plus 430. The Mavericks now have Klay Thompson. Their number really hasn't moved all that much, but stays less than a 5-1 price at plus 490. Let's start with the top 4. What is your assessment on what turns out to look like a slight changing of the guard in the Western Conference?
I agree, because you can only base on, of course, what you saw last year, which we thought the Oklahoma City Thunder were a very good team, and what you've done for me lately, which means in the offseason with players to be added. And I thought the Oklahoma City Thunder added 2 wonderful pieces to that franchise that can do some of the dirty work and also have some of those guys with a little bit more veteran leadership. The Denver Nuggets, maybe the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic. We understand that. The Timberwolves, still a very good team. And then again, rounding out that top 4, the Dallas Mavericks, who made the move to get Klay Thompson. So if we're looking at those first 4 teams, I do think it makes a lot of sense. But if we start to extend it down, I talked about this on the radio yesterday with Kevin with the Los Angeles Lakers. Here's what I don't understand. Like, they sit at a 15-1 price, just outside of that shelf where, the Dallas Mavericks at that plus 490 are in that top 4. And I say to myself, it's amazing how hard it is to find another player, meaning to go along with Anthony Davis and LeBron James, to formulate that big 3 and blast everybody in the Western Conference. Like, LeBron James should not be playing this good of basketball this late in his career. And have a player like Anthony Davis, one of the top 10 players in the league, where where why can't you find a third player? And also, why isn't a third player willing to come to the Lakers? Like, that's my destination. That's where I want to be. If we get the third piece to the puzzle here, we'll be right up there with OKC, Denver, the Timberwolves, and the Mavericks. It's amazing over the past 2 to 3 years, we can't find that third guy when typically in the NBA, it's always showed us the really good basketball teams with really good players attract really good talent who want to play there and take less money. And we haven't been able to find that with the Lakers.
Are you saying Bronny James isn't that third piece for the Lakers to be a true contender to the Western Conference crown? That is insane. I will say this. LeBron James opted out of his contract. He is technically still a free agent. He was expected to opt out to take a budget-friendly deal for the franchise to allow them to make a run at insert a Klay Thompson or one of the remaining free agents around the NBA. As of yesterday, we got a report that LeBron is going to sign a max contract for a 2-year deal toward the tail end of his NBA career. I would agree, though, even Anthony Davis and LeBron James at a 15-1 price should still present some sort of contention from the odds. Phoenix still has, as of this moment, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, 13-1 price, but over an $8 drop-off from Dallas to Phoenix. And Donnie, what really stands out to me last year, the entirety of the regular season, you and I had the conversation. OKC's at the top. Minnesota's at the top. When are the odds going to reflect that these two teams are going to enter with two of the best records in the Western Conference, positioned to make a run to a conference championship? It didn't really happen until the postseason. And of course, Minnesota made the Western Conference Finals and was a favorite entering the series against the Dallas Mavericks. But it wasn't really the case from the odds perspective. It was still the Clippers, rightfully so the Nuggets, the reigning champs at the time. The Lakers, could they make the run? The Suns still had a short price despite giving us nothing during the regular season to make us think they were a true conference contender. Now, at least here in the summer, those odds have changed greatly. The Suns, they move back. The Clippers move back in a big way after losing Paul George. The Warriors, a 20-1 price still, but not looked at optimistically from the odds perspective without Klay Thompson entering next year.
And by the way, how many good teams there are in the Western Conference? Like, you go all the way down the standings, or at least the odds standings on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Sure, you might leave out maybe Portland and Utah. The San Antonio Spurs, we expect much, much more from this year, but you can even leave them out. The Houston Rockets almost made the playoffs last year. The Kings, the Clippers, the Pelicans, Grizzlies, Warriors, and Lakers. Before you even get to that top shelf, boy, that is a talented conference.